Fine. I'll read you to sleep. Here, lay down, sweetheart. A soft and fluffy Velveteen Rabbit lived in a toy box in a boy's room. Each day, the boy opened the toy box and picked up Velveteen Rabbit, and Velveteen Rabbit was happy. Then newer, brighter toys came into the toy box. They had special tricks. Some could move when the boy pushed a button, others bounced high. Velveteen Rabbit had no special tricks or buttons. No wonder the boy started to choose these other new toys. At night, when the toys were back, all in the toy box, the other toys talked with pride about the fine things they could do. Velveteen Rabbit was quiet. There was not much to say. Only one other toy in the toy box was like Velveteen Rabbit. Cowboy Horse was also a soft, fluffy toy, but he was old. Most of his hair was worn away. Cowboy Horse said to Velveteen Rabbit, "Soft toys like us are really the lucky ones. We get loved the most. And when soft toys get loved and loved, we can become real." "What is real?" said Velveteen Rabbit. "Being real is the best," said Cowboy Horse. "You can move when you want to move. When you are real, if you are loved, you can show your love back." One day Nana, who took care of the boy, flew open the lid of the toy box. She said in a busy tone, "Oh dear, that walking doggy is missing. I must find something else for the boy." In a second, Velveteen Rabbit was plopped down onto the bed with the boy. This began another happy time for Velveteen Rabbit. Each night the boy would hold Velveteen Rabbit close in his arms. In the morning, the boy would show Velveteen Rabbit how to make rabbit holes under the sheets. If the boy went outside to a picnic or to the park, Velveteen Rabbit would come with him too. After a while, with the hugging and holding, much of Velveteen Rabbit's fur got matted down. Its pink nose grew less pink with all the boy's kisses. But Velveteen Rabbit did not care. It was happy. One day the boy became sick. His forehead got very hot. The doctor came and went. Nana walked back and forth in fear. Day after day the boy stayed in bed. There was nothing for Velveteen Rabbit to do but to stay in bed too, day after day. Then at last the boy got better. Such joy in the house. The doctor said the boy must go to the shore. How wonderful, thought Velveteen Rabbit. Many times the boy had talked happily about the shore and told of its white sands and big blue ocean. "What about this old bunny?" Nana asked the doctor. "That old thing," said the doctor, "is full of scarlet fever germs. Burn it at once. Get him a new bunny." So Velveteen Rabbit was thrown into a sack along with the boy's bed sheets and old clothes and a lot of junk. The sack was carried to the backyard. The gardener was told to burn the whole thing. But the gardener was too busy with picking the beans and peas before nightfall, so he left the sack behind. "I will take care of it tomorrow," he said. The sack was not tied at the top, and Velveteen Rabbit fell out. The next day, when the gardener picked up the sack to take it away to be burned, Velveteen Rabbit was not in it. Then it started to rain. Velveteen Rabbit was sad. So far away from the boy, never again to be nice and cozy together, and now soaking wet. A tear fell from Velveteen Rabbit's eye over his cheek. It plopped onto the grass. All at once, at the spot where the tear fell, a flower grew up. Then the bud of the flower opened. A tiny fairy. "Little Rabbit," said the fairy, "do you know who I am?" "I wish I did," said Velveteen Rabbit. "I am the fairy that takes care of toys that are well loved," said the fairy. By then, Velveteen Rabbit was shabby and grey. The boy had loved off all of its whiskers. The pink lining in the ears had long turned grey. Its brown spots, once fresh and bright, were now faded and hard to see. "It is time now for me to make you real," said the fairy. "I think I remember real," said Velveteen Rabbit. Now, what was it Cowboy Horse had said? Ah, yes. When you are real, you can move when you want to move. If you are loved, you can love back. With one touch of the fairy's wand, Velveteen Rabbit felt different, tickly. All of a sudden, each one of its two legs sewn together tight could move. A fly landed on Velveteen Rabbit's head, and it was itchy. As quick as a wink, that foot was up at the Velveteen Rabbit's head to scratch it off. So this is being real. I can move when I want to move. "I will show you some new friends," said the fairy. And the fairy took Velveteen Rabbit where several rabbits ran and hopped about. Soon they were all great friends. Time went by. The boy was back from the shore. He was all better now. One day the boy went to the backyard to play. From the trees nearby, a few rabbits hopped out. One rabbit was brown all over, and another one was all white. A third rabbit had brown spots, most of them faded. That one hopped the closest to the boy. The boy thought, "Why, this rabbit looks just like my old bunny that was lost when I was sick. I loved that bunny." What he didn't know was that it was his very own bunny, come back to see the boy, for he was the reason the Velveteen Rabbit had become real. You still haven't fallen asleep, I see. Okay, I'll keep going, sweetheart. Once upon a time, a girl named Goldilocks lived in a house at the edge of the woods. In those days, curls of hair were called locks. She was Goldilocks because golden hair ran down her head and shoulders. One morning, Goldilocks was out for a walk when she came across a beautiful bird. She followed that bird right into the woods, where her mother had said many times she must never go. But Goldilocks didn't think of that. Deeper and deeper into the woods she went. But where was the bird? It was nowhere to be seen. Goldilocks looked around. That's when she knew she was lost. But a house was not far away. I wonder who lives there, she thought, so deep into the woods. She went up and knocked on the door. No answer. She knocked again. Still no answer. Goldilocks knocked a third time and the door opened, but no one was behind the door. "Well, the door is already open," said the girl, "so I may as well go in." Goldilocks smelled a wonderful smell and soon knew why. On the table were 3 steaming bowls of oatmeal. All of a sudden, she realized how very hungry she was. What Goldilocks did not know, however, is that 3 bears lived in this house. In fact, that very morning the 3 bears had sat down to their bowls of oatmeal, but the cereal was too hot, so they had decided to take a short walk. They said to each other, "By the time we return home, our oatmeal will be perfect." Gazing at the steaming bowls of oatmeal, Goldilocks thought, "I'm sure whoever lives here won't mind if I take just one sip." She sat at the first chair and took a sip. "Ah," she said, "it's too hot." She moved to the next bowl and took a sip. "Ah," she said, "it's too cold." She moved to the third bowl and took a sip. "It's just right." And before she knew it, the oatmeal was all gone. Goldilocks rubbed her tummy. "I'm full! I must find somewhere to sit that's more comfortable." She went to the living room. 3 chairs were lined up in a row. 1 big chair, 1 medium-sized chair, and a wee little chair. "I'm sure whoever lives here will not mind if I sit on just 1 chair," said Goldilocks. She sat on the big chair, but it was too hard. "The next chair looks good," said Goldilocks. She moved to the medium-sized chair, but it was too soft. "The wee little chair looks better," said the girl. She sat on the little chair, and it was just right. But when Goldilocks leaned back a bit, the chair broke into a dozen pieces. She plopped right on the floor. "Oh, no," Goldilocks wailed. Then she yawned. There must be somewhere she could lie down for a short nap. The girl saw a ladder and climbed it to an attic. In a row, 3 beds were lined up. 1 big bed, 1 medium-sized bed, and a wee little bed. "I'm sure whoever lives here won't mind if I lay down for just a short nap," she said. She lay down on the big bed, but it was too hard. She laid down on the medium-sized bed, but it was too soft. The girl lay down on the wee little bed, and it was just right. As her head hit the pillow, Goldilocks was fast asleep. Just then, the 3 bears came home from their walk. "Oh my," said Mama Bear. "Did either of you leave the front door open?" "Not I," said Papa Bear. "Not I," said Little Bear. Slowly the 3 bears stepped inside and looked around. "Most odd," said Papa Bear, seeing his spoon in his bowl. "Someone has been eating my oatmeal." "Most odd indeed," said Mama Bear, also seeing her spoon in her bowl. "Someone has been eating my oatmeal." "This is the oddest of all," said Little Bear. "Someone has been eating my oatmeal, and they ate it all up." The 3 bears were very surprised, as you can imagine. With care, they stepped into their living room. "Do you think someone was sitting in my chair?" said Papa Bear. "I know someone was sitting in my chair," said Mama Bear, "because I can see the seat cushion is pushed down." "And I know someone was sitting in my chair," said Little Bear, "because it's all broken." The 3 bears were even more surprised at that. They climbed the ladder to their attic. "Someone has been sleeping on my bed," said Papa Bear, who could see that his blankets were moved. Someone has been sleeping on my bed too, said Mama Bear, who could also see that her blankets were moved. Someone has been sleeping on my bed, said Little Bear. And look, she is still there. Goldilocks bolted awake. 3 bears were looming over her, and they did not look happy. Oh my, said Goldilocks, jumping out of bed. As quick as she could, she climbed down the ladder and ran out the front door. Little Bear chased after her. Wait, please. Goldilocks stopped and turned around. Tell me, said Little Bear, why did you come inside our house? I guess I didn't think, said Goldilocks. And why did you eat my oatmeal? Said Little Bear. Well, I guess I didn't think, said Goldilocks. And why did you break my chair and sleep in my bed? Said Little Bear. Well, I guess I didn't think about that either, said Goldilocks. They were silent. Goldilocks said, I suppose I could have waited outside your door. We were coming right home, said Mama Bear. We might have invited you in if we knew you were hungry. I'm sorry about the chair, said Goldilocks. I guess you saw it broke? Yep, said Mama Bear with a frown. I'm good at fixing things, said Goldilocks, if you have glue. Of course we have glue, said Papa Bear. What kind of bears do you think we are? I will make it up to you, said Goldilocks. Come on in then, dear, said Mama Bear. We'll start over, said Papa Bear with a nod. Come in, said Little Bear, jumping up and down. With smiles, they skipped together inside the bear's house. Still not asleep, huh? You must love my voice. The Little Grey Mouse, the Little House. There was once a man named Prudent who was a widower, and he lived alone with his little daughter. His wife had died a few days after the birth of this little girl, who was named Rosalie. Rosalie's father had a large fortune. He lived in a great house, which belonged to him. This house was surrounded by a large garden in which Rosalie walked whenever she pleased to do so. She had been trained with great tenderness and gentleness, but her father had accustomed her to the most unquestioning obedience. He forbade her positively to ask him any useless questions or to insist upon knowing anything he did not wish to tell her. In this way, by unceasing care and watchfulness, he had almost succeeded in curing one of Rosalie's great faults, a fault indeed unfortunately too common, curiosity. Rosalie never left the park, which was surrounded by high walls. She never saw anyone but her father. They had no domestic in the house. Everything seemed to be done of itself. She always had what she wanted: clothing, books, work, and playthings. Her father educated her himself, and although she was nearly 15 years old, she was never weary, and never thought that she might live otherwise, and might see more of the world. There was a little house at the end of the park without windows, and with but one door, which was always locked. Rosalie's father entered this house every day, and always carried the key about his person. Rosalie thought it was only a little hut in which the garden tools were kept. She never thought of speaking about it, but one day, when she was seeking a watering pot for her flowers, she said to him, "Father, please give me the key of the little house in the garden." "What do you want with this key, Rosalie?" "I want a watering pot, and I think I could find one in that little house." "No, Rosalie, there is no watering pot there." Prudent's voice trembled so in pronouncing these words that Rosalie looked up with surprise and saw that his face was pale and his forehead bathed in perspiration. "What is the matter, father?" said she, alarmed. "Nothing, daughter, nothing. It was my asking for the key which agitated you so violently, father. What does this little house contain which frightens you so much?" "Rosalie, Rosalie, you do not know what you are saying. Go and look for your watering pot in the greenhouse." "But, father, what is there in the little garden house?" "Nothing that can interest you, Rosalie." "But why do you go there every day without permitting me to go with you?" "Rosalie, you know that I do not like to be questioned, and that curiosity is the greatest defect in your character." Rosalie said no more, but she remained very thoughtful. This little house, of which she had never before thought, was now constantly in her mind. "What can be concealed there?" she said to herself. "How pale my father turned when I asked his permission to enter. I am sure he thought I should be in some sort of danger. But why does he go there himself every day? It is no doubt to carry food to some ferocious beast confined there. But if it was some wild animal, would I not hear it roar or howl or shake the house? No, I have never heard any sound from this cabin. It cannot then be a beast. Besides, If it was a ferocious beast, it would devour my father when he entered alone. Perhaps, however, it is chained. But if it is indeed chained, then there would be no danger for me. What can it be? A prisoner. My father is good. He would not deprive any unfortunate innocent of light and liberty. Well, I absolutely must discover this mystery. How shall I manage it? If I could only secretly get the key from my father for a half-hour. Perhaps some day he will forget it. Rosalie was aroused from this chain of reflection by her father, who called to her with a strangely agitated voice. "Here, father, I am coming." She entered the house and looked steadily at her father. His pale, sad countenance indicated great agitation. More than ever curious, she resolved to feign gaiety and indifference in order to allay her father's suspicions and make him feel secure. In this way she thought she might perhaps obtain possession of the key at some future time. He might not always think of it, if she herself seemed to have forgotten it. They seated themselves at the table. Prudent ate but little, and was sad and silent, in spite of his effect to appear gay. Rosalie, however, seemed so thoughtless and bright that her father at last recovered his accustomed good spirits. Rosalie would be 15 years old in 3 weeks. Her father had promised an agreeable surprise for this event. A few days passed peacefully away. There remained but 15 days before her birthday. One morning Prudence said to Rosalie, "My dear child, I am compelled to be absent for 1 hour. I must go out to arrange something for your birthday. Wait for me in the house, my dear. Do not yield yourself up to idle curiosity. In 15 days you will know all that you desire to know, for I read your thoughts and I know what occupies your mind. Adieu, my daughter. Beware of curiosity." Prudent embraced his daughter tenderly and withdrew, leaving her with great reluctance. As soon as he was out of sight, Rosalie ran to her father's room, and what was her joy to see the key forgotten upon the table. She seized it and ran quickly to the end of the park. Arrived at the little house, she remembered the words of her father. "Beware of curiosity." She hesitated, and was upon the point of returning the key without having looked at the house, when she thought she heard a light groan. She put her ear against the door, and heard a very little voice singing softly. "A lonely prisoner I pine. No hope of freedom now is mine. I soon must draw my latest breath, and in this dungeon meet my death." "No doubt," said Rosalie to herself, "this is some unfortunate creature whom my father holds captive." Tapping softly upon the door, she said, "Who are you, and what can I do for you?" "Open the door, Rosalie. I pray you open the door." "But why are you a prisoner? Have you not committed some crime?" "Alas, no, Rosalie. An enchanter keeps me here a prisoner. Save me, and I will prove my gratitude by telling you truly who I am." Rosalie no longer hesitated. Her curiosity was stronger than her obedience. She put the key in the lock, but her hand trembled so that she could not open it. She was about to give up the effort, when the little voice continued. "Rosalie, that which I have to tell you will teach you many things which will interest you. Your father is not what he appears to be." At these words, Rosalie made a last effort. The key turned, and the door opened. Rosalie looked in eagerly. The little house was dark. She could see nothing, but she heard the little voice. "Thanks, Rosalie. It is to you that I owe my deliverance." The voice seemed to come from the earth. She looked and saw in a corner 2 brilliant little eyes gazing at her maliciously. "My cunning trick has succeeded, Rosalie, and betrayed you into yielding to your curiosity. If I had not spoken and sung, you would have returned with the key, and I should have been lost. Now that you have set me at liberty, you and your father are both in my power." Rosalie did not yet fully comprehend the extent of the misfortune she had brought about by her disobedience. She knew, however, that it was a dangerous foe which her father had held captive, and she wished to retire and close the door. "Stop, Rosalie! It is no longer in your power to keep me in this odious prison from which I never could have escaped if you had waited until your 15th birthday." At this moment the little house disappeared entirely, and Rosalie saw with the greatest consternation that the key alone remained in her hand. She now saw at her side a small grey mouse who gazed at her with its sparkling little eyes and began to laugh in a thin, discordant voice. "Ha, ha, ha! What a frightened air you have, Rosalie! In truth, you amuse me very much, but it is lucky for me that you had so much curiosity. It has been nearly 15 years since I was shut up in this frightful prison, having no power to injure your father, whom I hate, or to bring any evil upon you, whom I detest because you are his daughter. Who are you then, wicked mouse? I am the mortal enemy of your family, my pet. I call myself the Fairy Detestable, and the name suits me, I assure you. All the world hates me, and I hate all the world. I shall follow you now for the rest of your life, wherever you go. Go away at once, miserable creature. A mouse is not to be feared, and I will find a way to get rid of you. We shall see, my pet. I shall remain at your side, wherever you go. Rosalie now ran rapidly towards the house. Every time she turned, she saw the mouse galloping after her and laughing with a mocking air. Arrived at the house, she tried to crush the mouse in the door, but it remained open in spite of every effort she could make, and the mouse remained quietly upon the door-sill. "Wait a while, wicked monster!" cried Rosalie, beside herself with rage and terror. She seized a broom and tried to dash it violently against the mouse, but the broom was on fire at once, blazed up and burned her hands. She threw it quickly to the floor and pushed it into the chimney with her foot, lest it should set fire to the house. Then, seizing a kettle which was boiling on the fire, she emptied it upon the mouse. But the boiling water was changed into good fresh milk, and the mouse commenced drinking it, saying, "How exceedingly amiable you are, Rosalie! Not content with having released me from captivity, you give me an excellent breakfast." Poor Rosalie now began to weep bitterly. She was utterly at a loss what to do when she heard her father entering. "My father," cried she, "my father! Oh, cruel mouse, I beseech you, in pity to go away, that my father may not see you." "No, I shall not go, but I will hide myself behind your heels until your father knows of your disobedience." The mouse had scarcely concealed herself behind Rosalie when Prudent entered. He looked at Rosalie, whose paleness and embarrassed air betrayed her fear. "Rosalie," said Prudent, with a trembling voice, "I forgot the key to the little garden house. Have you found it?" "Here it is, father," said Rosalie, presenting it to him and colouring deeply. "How did this cream come to be upset on the floor?" "Father, it was the cat." "The cat? Impossible." "The cat brought a vessel of milk to the middle of the room and upset it there?" No, father, it was I that did it. In carrying it, I accidentally overturned it." Rosalie spoke in a low voice and dared not look at her father. "Take the broom, Rosalie, and sweep up this cream." "There is no broom, father." "No broom? There was one when I left the house. I burned it, father, accidentally by... She paused. Her father looked fixedly at her, threw a searching, unquiet glance about the room, sighed, and turned his steps slowly towards the little house in the garden. Rosalie fell sobbing bitterly upon a chair. The mouse did not stir. A few moments afterwards, Prudent entered hastily, his countenance marked with horror. "Rosalie, unhappy child, what have you done? You have yielded to your fatal curiosity and released our most cruel enemy from prison." "Pardon me, father. Oh, pardon me," she cried, throwing herself at his feet. "I was ignorant of the evil I did." "Misfortune is always the result of disobedience, Rosalie. Disobedient children think they are only committing a small fault when they are doing the greatest injury to themselves and others." "But, father, who and W.R. hat then is this mouse, who causes you this terrible fear? How, if it had so much power, could you keep it so long a prisoner, and why can you not put it in prison again?" "This mouse, my unhappy child, is a wicked fairy, but very powerful. For myself, I am the genius Prudent, and since you have given liberty to my enemy, I can now reveal to you that which I should have concealed until you were 15 years old. I am, then, as I said to you, the genius Prudent. Your dear mother was a simple mortal, but her virtues and her graces touched the queen of the fairies and also the king of the genii, and they permitted me to wed her. I gave a splendid festival on my marriage day. Unfortunately, I forgot to invoke the Fairy Detestable, who was already irritated against me for having married a princess, after having refused one of her daughters. She was so exasperated against me that she swore an implacable hatred against me, my wife, and my children. I was not terrified at her threats, as I myself had a power almost equal to her own, and I was much beloved by the Queen of the Fairies. Many times, by the power of my enchantments, I triumphed over the malicious hatred of the fairy Detestable. A few hours after your birth, your mother was thrown into the most violent convulsions which I could not calm. I left her for a few moments to invoke the aid of the Queen of the Fairies. When I returned, your mother was dead. The wicked fairy Detestable had profited by my absence and caused her death. She was about to endow you with all the passions and vices of this evil world when my unexpected return happily paralyzed her efforts. I interrupted her at the moment when she had endowed you with a curiosity sufficient to make you wretched and to subject you entirely to her power at 15 years of age. By my power, united to that of the Queen of the Fairies, I counterbalanced this fatal influence, and we decided that you should not fall under her power at 15 years of age, unless you yielded 3 times under the gravest circumstances to your idle curiosity. At the same time, the Queen of the Fairies, to punish the fairy Detestable, changed her into a mouse, shut her up in the little garden house, and declared that she should never leave it unless you voluntarily opened the door. Also, that she should never resume her original form of fairy unless you yielded 3 times to your criminal curiosity before you were 15 years of age. Lastly, that if you resisted once the fatal passion, you should be forever released, as well as myself, from the power of the fairy Detestable. With great difficulty I obtained all these favours, and only by promising that I would share your fate and become, like yourself, the slave of the fairy Detestable, if you weakly allowed yourself to yield 3 times to your curiosity. I promise solemnly to educate you in such a manner as to destroy this terrible passion, calculated to cause so many sorrows. For all these reasons I have confined myself and you, Rosalie, in this enclosure. I have permitted you to see no one, not even a domestic. I procured by my power all that your heart desired, and I have been feeling quite satisfied in having succeeded so well with you. In 3 weeks you would have been 15, and forever delivered from the odious yoke of the fairy Detestable. I was alarmed when you asked for the key of the little house, of which you had never before seemed to think. I could not conceal the painful impression which this demand made upon me. My agitation excited your curiosity. In spite of your gaiety and assumed thoughtlessness, I penetrated your thoughts, and you may judge of my grief when the Queen of the Fairies ordered me to make the temptation possible, and the resistance meritorious by leaving the key at least once in your reach. I was thus compelled to leave it, that fatal key, and thus facilitate by my absence my own and your destruction. Imagine, Rosalie, what I suffered during the hour of my absence, leaving you alone with this temptation before your eyes, and when I saw your embarrassment and blushes on my return, indicating to me too well that you had allowed your curiosity to master you. I was commanded to conceal everything from you, to tell you nothing of your birth or of the dangers which surround you until your 15th birthday. If I had disobeyed, you would at once have fallen into the power of the fairy Detestable. And yet, Rosalie, all is not lost. You can yet repair your fault by resisting for 15 days this terrible passion. At 15 years of age, you are to have been united to a charming prince who is related to us, the Prince Gracious. This union is yet possible. Ah, Rosalie, my still dear child, take pity on yourself if you have no mercy for me, and resist your curiosity. Rosalie was on her knees before her father, her face concealed in her hands and weeping bitterly. At these words she took courage, embraced him tenderly, and said to him, "Oh, father, I promise you solemnly that I will atone for this fault. Do not leave me, dear father. With you by me, I shall be inspired with a courage which would otherwise fail me. I dare not be deprived of your wise paternal counsel. Alas, Rosalie, it is no longer in my power to remain with you, for I am now under the dominion of my enemy. Most certainly, she will not allow me to stay by your side and warn you against the snares and temptations which she will spread at your feet. I am astonished at not having seen my cruel foe before this time. The view of my affliction and despair would have for her hard heart an irresistible charm." "I have been near you all the time at your daughter's feet," said the little grey mouse, in a sharp voice, stepping out and showing herself to the unfortunate genius. "I have been highly entertained at the recital of all that I have already made you suffer, and the pleasure I felt in hearing you give this account to your daughter induced me to conceal myself till this moment. Now say adieu to your dear but curious Rosalie. She must accompany me, and I forbid you to follow her." Saying these words, She seized the hem of Rosalie's dress with her sharp little teeth and tried to draw her away. Rosalie uttered a piercing cry and clung convulsively to her father, but an irresistible force bore her off. The unfortunate genius seized a stick and raised it to strike the mouse, but before he had time to inflict the blow, the mouse placed one of her little paws on the genius's foot, and he remained as immovable as a statue. Rosalie embraced her father's knees and implored the mouse to take pity upon her, but the little wretch gave one of her sharp, diabolical laughs and said, "Come, come, my pretty. Pity it is not here that you will find the temptations to yield twice to your irresistible fault. We will travel all over the world together, and I will show you many countries in 15 days. The mouse pulled Rosalie without ceasing. Her arms were still clasped around her father, striving to resist the overpowering force of her enemy. The mouse uttered a discordant little cry, and suddenly the house was in flames. Rosalie had sufficient presence of mind to reflect that if she allowed herself to be burned, there would be no means left of saving her father, who must then remain eternally under the power of Detestable. Whereas if she preserved her own life, there remained always some chance of rescuing him. "Adieu, adieu, dear father," she cried. "We will meet again in 15 days. After having given you over to your enemy, your Rosalie will yet save you." She then tore herself away, in order not to be devoured by the flames. She ran on rapidly for some time without knowing where she was going. She walked several hours, but at last, exhausted with fatigue and half dead with hunger, she resolved to approach a kind-looking woman who was seated at her door. "Madame," said she, "will you give me a place to sleep? I am dying with hunger and fatigue. Will you not be so kind as to allow me to enter and pass the night with you?" "How is it that so beautiful a girl as yourself is found upon the highways? And what ugly animal is that with the expression of a demon which accompanies you?" Rosalie turned round and saw the little grey mouse smiling upon her mockingly. She tried to chase it away, but the mouse obstinately refused to move. The good woman, seeing this contest, shook her head and said, "Go on your ways, my pretty one. The evil one and his followers cannot lodge with me." Weeping bitterly, Rosalie continued her journey, and wherever she presented herself, they refused to receive her and the mouse, who never quitted her side. She entered a forest where happily she found a brook at which she quenched her thirst. She found also fruits and nuts in abundance. She drank, ate, and seated herself near a tree, thinking with agony of her father and wondering what would become of him during the 15 days. While Rosalie was thus musing, she kept her eyes closed so as not to see the wicked little grey mouse. Her fatigue and the silence and darkness around her brought on sleep, and she slept a long time profoundly. "Oh, you're asleep now. Good night, my sweetheart."